Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. All right, everyone is filing in. I like to say that one of the things I love the most about our webinars is that no matter where you're at, the best seat in the house is the one that you are in. So thank you for being with us today. Hello and welcome to our friends and alumni of the University of Michigan. My name is Kiara Trotter, and I serve as the Director of Alumni Career and Education for your Alumni Association. I use she and her pronouns. We're excited and really grateful to have Dr. Jennifer Nash here with us today as we explore today's topic, which is resume refresh, something I'm sure we all could use. Today's mini webinar is a part of a series that we designed to support those embarking on a job search, whether unexpected or planned. You can find this week's full lineup and additional job search resources on our website. And please feel free to share that link as a resource to your networks. We have this mini webinar, and then we have two more for this week. And that webpage also features some really amazing job search resources. So feel free to check it out. All right, before we get started, I just want to share with you that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with you in a follow-up email. Please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature in your toolbar, and the chat is open for you to engage with other participants during this session. Since this mini webinar is only 30 minutes long, we may not get to all of your questions, but please submit them anyway, and we'll do our best to address them here or in the follow-up information that we'll send to you next week, or in our live Q&A session with expert career coaches that we're hosting this Friday, and Dr. Nash will be one of the coaches on that panel. All right, so now a little bit more about Dr. Nash. Jennifer Nash, PhD, MBA, PCC, is an executive advisor, leadership expert, consultant, and MG100 executive coach for Fortune 500 organizations such as Google, Ford, ExxonMobil, JP Morgan, IBM, Boeing, and Verizon. She is founder and CEO of Jennifer Nash Coaching and Consulting, helping successful leaders deliver exceptional results. Jennifer's 25-year resume includes serving in executive and leadership roles at Deloitte Consulting and Ford Motor Company, and as adjunct professor at the University of Michigan. She contributes to Harvard Business Review, has presented her research at Columbia University, and is a Harvard McLean Institute of Coaching Fellow. Jennifer is the best-selling author of Be Human, Lead Human, a 14-time award-winning leadership book designed to elevate leadership and communication skills and enhance individual and organizational effectiveness. All right, so now you get to experience the wonder that is Dr. Jennifer Nash. I'll turn it over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Kara. That's a wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here today to talk with everybody about resume strategies. And with our amazing Michigan alumni today, thank you for giving us your time. So please let us know where you're calling in from. Drop a note in the chat and say hello. We encourage you to stay to the end as we have a few special bonuses and surprises for those of you joining us live today. All right, let's dive in. Next slide, please. So why is a strong resume important? Well, having a strong resume is important for several reasons. First and foremost, it's a personal marketing tool, and it helps you stand out in a competitive job market like we have today. It aligns your skills with employer needs. And I would also add that it doesn't just align your skills with employer needs, but when it's done well, it can really be a magnet that attracts the right jobs to you. And this is particularly important when you're trying to change careers, climb the ladder, or even transition from industries and sectors. Next slide, please. So here's a pro tip that I give the coaching clients that work with me. I always recommend that you have a 2-resume strategy. So the 1 resume is your entire job history. It lists all of the jobs that you've held, the responsibilities that you've had, and every single accomplishment and how you've added value to organizations. I call this resume the kitchen sink resume. So this resume is just for you. It doesn't go out to anybody else. No recruiters see it. This is just your way of tracking everything that you've done throughout your career so that it's easier to remember. And sometimes as we get further in our career, It's a little challenging to remember everything that you've done, and this will offer you a record of that. It also helps you see your career path, and when you look back over your career path, it will help you start to see how things are linked together and perhaps why you made some of the decisions you made to choose the jobs that you have chosen. That pattern is important as you're looking to design with intention that next chapter in your career journey. So then the magic is that you have this kitchen sink resume, you have all these great bullets, and now you are going to strategically pull bullets off of that resume that tell the story you want to tell in the most compelling way for the job that you're going to apply for. And that gets us to the curated resume, which is the second resume. This resume is the one that you drop where for any job, right? And you're going to curate that resume for each job and tailor it for each job. So some people will need a CV. That's true for academic roles and perhaps some overseas roles. And just a scope disclaimer for right now, we're targeting the US market here and we are not addressing CVs during today's session. Next slide, please. All right, so I know we have a lot of people on the call who are coming from public sector and are potentially looking for their next opportunity. So if this is you, and even if it's not, here are several guidelines to follow when structuring your resume. There's several components that you need to have. You've got to have a header up at the top with your name, your contact information, and make sure that you're using a professional email address. So it's really time to ditch the MySpace or the AOL or the Yahoo. Those are really not a good look because they make you look like you're out of touch. So Gmail is a perfectly acceptable professional email address. You also want to include a LinkedIn URL. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, it's really time to get one. The next section you're going to have on your resume is a professional summary. And this professional summary is a concise statement, 1 to 2 sentences, that showcases your value. And you do that through a unique value proposition. The third section you're going to have on your resume is the experience section. And in this section, you're highlighting roles and using ACR bullets to talk about those roles. ACR stands for action, context, and results. Action is what you do, so you use an action verb. Context is where or how you do something or did something. And then the result is the outcome that you realized, and that can be shown either in quantitative or qualitative formats. The fourth section on your resume is going to be education and certifications, and these are tailored based on your experience level. The fifth section is going to show the additional information. So this is anywhere where you put technical skills, you put language abilities, you know, memberships of some kind, different awards or honors. So you've got 5 sections on this resume, and they should be listed in the order I've described them. Next slide, please. All right, so I've reviewed thousands of resumes since 2008, and there are some common mistakes that I see, and this applies whether you're coming from public sector or not. So mistake number 1 is that your resume is either too long or too short. I have seen 3-page resumes for someone with 1 year of experience, and I've seen a 1-page resume for an executive with 30 years of experience. So the lesson here is make your resume match your breadth and depth of experience. 1 page is sufficient for most people. 2 pages only if you're a senior executive. And staff recruiters, you may not know this, but staff recruiters only look at a resume for, on average, 7.4 seconds. So if you give them more than 1 page, they likely won't even see it. Mistake number 2, being too technical. So jargon and tech speak make it really difficult for a non-technical human recruiter to understand what you do and how to add value. So even if you get past the ATS, you likely won't get around one interview from a human. And the only time you should be technical on your resume is if you're applying for a tech job with a tech recruiter. Otherwise, keep it in layman's terms. And mistake number 3, and this is the big one, no results. This is a huge miss. When you miss showing the result, you miss showing how you add value. And that's exactly what companies want to know. And here's another comment I will make. I also add that I've seen multiple people use the spaghetti approach. Now you may be wondering what the spaghetti approach is. Spaghetti approach is where they take the same resume and they throw it literally at hundreds or thousands of job applications to see what will stick. Don't do that. It's not effective. Yes, you may increase your submission rate, but there's a 99.99999% chance that you won't get past the ATS. Next slide, please. All right, so we've talked about the mistakes to avoid. Now I want to talk about a couple ways to strengthen your resume right away. So number one, you need to tailor it. You want to align it with your target role. And the way that you do this is you're going to review the job description carefully. You're going to use industry-specific language and keywords. And you want to highlight your most relevant accomplishments based on what the job description is asking for and how you're going to bring value. Number two, you're going to refine your experience bullets. So for example, remember we talked about that ACR format, right? The action, context, and results format. So maybe right now your bullet says something like managed team and completed projects on time. Okay, well, you want to broaden that a little bit, right? You want to give them really the context and the results of what happened. So maybe this now says, led a cross-functional team of 10 to enhance department processes, improving efficiency by 20%, and delivering projects 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Do you see how that shifts the experience and the value that you can bring to the company by showing them and highlighting what you were able to accomplish? The third way you can strengthen your resume is to optimize it for the ATS. And if you take nothing else away from this webinar, know this, that you need to get past that ATS screen in order to get to a human recruiter. And without that, you don't have an opportunity to get to that round one interview. So the game here is to beat the ATS. The way you do that is by using the keywords that are relevant from the job description. So you use exact wording from the job posting and you're going to hunt them down. So I literally will take a marker and I will print out the job description and I will highlight all of these keywords and then go through them one by one and ensure that they are included in my bullets on the resume that I'm submitting for that job. So on this resume that you're submitting, you're also going to avoid graphics and tables and images because the ATS can't read those as well. And you want to ensure that it has clear structured formatting using a sans serif font like Times New Roman or Arial or Cambria or Georgia. The optical reader can easily read that. The font size should be no larger than 12 point. Your bullets should be consistently sized and spaced, and we already talked about the length. So those are the 3 ways that you can strengthen your resume immediately today. All right, next slide, please. So if you, like many of you on the call, I'm sure you're looking to transition from public to private sector. Okay, so here's a strategy for you. You want to translate your resume into business language. So the easiest way to do this is to fire up generative AI or ChatGPT and input this prompt, and we'll put the prompt in the chat box for you. So I'm a government worker who was laid off, and I'm now looking for work outside of the public sector. Give me a list of phrases used in government and their corporate equivalent and put this in a table using a header. So when you put that into ChatGPT, you're going to get back a table that looks like what I've put on this slide. Now, if you don't know what ChatGPT gives you back is accurate or not, go find one of your friends or neighbors or colleagues who work in business, who work in industry, and they can help you figure it out. So share your bullet with them that you have on your government resume. Describe the actual work that you do with the behaviors that you do there and the skills that you use. Show them what ChatGPT said was the equivalent phrasing for that type of work, and then ask them to tell you if that's how it's described in the business world. So doing that data check and tacking back and forth will help you get to the right description on your resume when you submit it for an industry job. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so I know many of you on the call also have questions about ageism, and so let's talk about this. Ageism exists even if companies vehemently deny it, but there are techniques that you can use to combat it. First of all, I suggest trying to use a skills-based resume. Companies right now are increasingly moving to skills-based hiring, and a skills-based resume doesn't raise eyebrows. So typically what you normally see is a chronological resume where you've got your work experience listed from, your first job out of undergrad all the way to, what you're doing now. That's a chronologically formatted resume. A skills-based resume, it showcases value delivered over that chronological format, and it doesn't reveal your graduation or work experience dates, which, as you know, they're sometimes using to help them guess how old you are. The second technique here is to remove those graduation dates, especially if it's been more than 5 years ago. The third technique is to rephrase how you describe your experience. So, for example, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I've got 20 plus years of experience in marketing." Well, right away, they're getting a target range of how old you are. So instead of that, you can say, proven experience in marketing strategy or proven expertise in marketing strategy and campaign execution. So, in other words, highlight those skills over the tenure. Now, I'm going to give you a pro tip here because this also depends on what you're applying for. Years of experience matter if people are hiring you as a 1099 or a gig consultant because you're seen as an expert. But it can work against you if you're applying for a W-2 job. So keep that distinction in mind when you're thinking about your own personal situation. The fourth tip I have for you here is avoid outdated tech terms and language. This is not the place to talk about a slow AOL dial-up during your behavioral interview. You want to stay current with the industry language and show that you're relevant, you know what social media is, you know what ChatGPT is, and you're able to use it, and you're up to date with modern tools and trends in your field. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked about resume formatting, strategies for transitioning from public to private sector, common mistakes to avoid, and combating ageism in the application process. So here are your next steps. So number one, a strong resume tells a compelling story. You want to structure it and tailor it for each role. Number two, the keywords and ATS optimization matter. Ensure that it gets past that screening software. And number three, results-driven bullet points stand out. So show the impact and the value that you've delivered using numbers or qualitative results. Next slide, please. So we really appreciate you giving us your time today, and our team wanted to show you our gratitude. So we have two special bonuses to offer you. We know this is a lot of information, so this first bonus is going to make your life much easier. So my team and I have created a free resume accelerator for you to download and use to refine and enhance your resume. Just scan that QR code number 1 to get your bonus. The second bonus is if you found the content in this session helpful and you'd really like a more personalized one-on-one session, we have a fantastic limited time discount available for the first 25 people who sign up. Use code GOBLUE3525 when you scan that second QR code to get the discount, and that's actually a 50% discount. So act now if you want to take advantage of that amazing discount. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Kira for the Q&A. So Kira, what questions do we have coming in the chat?
Well, first of all, awesome job. You covered a lot of territory in a really short amount of time. We had a question come in the chat that was answered, but I do want to just highlight it just in case anyone missed it. So the question was, should the LinkedIn URL be a hyperlink or bit.ly or other shortened URL or a custom LinkedIn URL? The response that we provided was that best practice is to list a customized LinkedIn URL. Anything you want to add to that, Jennifer?
I completely agree.
Okay,
Mhm.
perfect. All right, next question. What advice would you have to mitigate the ethnicity/race bias or the perception of overqualification? And this is specifically for PhD holders. So anything for resume, if we want to mitigate any bias, specifically as it relates to names, for example, what advice would you give there?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So in terms of the overqualification, right, listing all of the degrees that you have, you always have the option to leave one of them off if you choose to do so. I'm not advocating that you do that, but if you feel like if you have a PhD and you're applying to a job that you feel like you'd be overqualified with that PhD, then maybe it's sufficient to just list a bachelor's degree. It's not that you are um, um, so I would say this. I would say you need to put on your resume what you are comfortable with and what you feel is right morally and ethically. So if you feel like it's okay for you to leave off a PhD because it makes you appear more overqualified, then leave it off. If conversely, if you feel like it will help your case, right, for the job that you're applying for in some dimension, then I would say put it on. The question around like the race and the bias in terms of the names, um, I would say that here may require a little more strategy around where you choose to apply and the companies that you're choosing to give your candidature to. If you start doing informational interviews and find out that maybe this is a company where DEI or, diversity is not welcomed, then maybe that's not a company that's a right fit for you. And so I would say approach that from the other end of the spectrum. Try to find that right fit first, so that you can show up authentically you and be who you are.
Yeah, and we can include in the resources that we share next week a really great webinar that talks specifically about this issue and lists a bunch of considerations. So we'll make sure we include that in the resources we share next week. Okay,
Sure.
next question. I constantly feel like I'm running out of space on my resume when trying to do it as a one pager, but I have trouble cutting aspects because I still feel like they're part of my story. What
Mhm.
advice would you give to someone who's having trouble cutting it down, even though they're trying really hard to?
Got it. I get that question a lot. And so when you think about your ACR bullets, right, you've got your action, context, and results. If you do a quick scan of your existing resume right now, I bet you're going to see that your bullets are probably longer than 2 lines. And that's because you have too much context in your bullet. So I would encourage you to think about what is the way that you could shorten up that context and still convey the same message that you want to convey. Maybe you're using too many prepositions. Maybe there is one word that you could use to describe something instead of 5 words. So, really getting clear and crisp and concise about the context will help you shorten that.
Thank you. For recent graduates who have less work experience, is it still effective to put education at the top of the resume with the graduation date? Or does this also fall into an ageism trap?
That's a good question. So the question is, should I put my education at the top if I'm a new grad, or should I bury the education down below and sort of, not call attention to the fact that I just graduated? I think that's the question, Kira.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, that's the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, because I haven't thought about like the ageism from a reverse perspective. Um, I would say that as a new graduate, um, I would still say to put your professional work experience first, even if that just includes internships, right? Because it's helping show that you are relevant and that you have some experiences that you have gained that you can bring and they are transferable to the position that you're going to be applying for and highlighting that. Um, if you're coming from a certain school at the university, they may have some different guidelines for you. So I would encourage you to follow the guidelines that the school that you're graduating from has for you. But in general, I would say it's perfectly okay to put your professional experience first and then put your education down below.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Can you go more into what should be in the second professional value section that you mentioned should be on our resumes?
The second section, I think, is the professional summary, is what they're referring
Professional
to.
summary. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the professional summary it's essentially the way that you want to be seen in the world. It's your personal brand. It's your unique value proposition. It is what you bring to the table. So remember we talked earlier about the fact that like you could say, oh, some people will start out this section by saying, I have 20 plus years of marketing experience. Well, right there, they're getting an idea of how old you are. So if you don't want to share that, you can say something like, I'm a marketing I have expertise in marketing and branding with, additional expertise in purchasing, something like that, right? So this is a section where you can use it to strategically call out keywords that are on the job description that maybe you didn't get to fit into your bullets. You can use this to sort of give, if you think about it like a Cliff's Notes summary, right? This is really what you want the employer to know about you. Um, and I have my clients set it up where they use the unique value proposition that we work on during a personal branding session to figure out what that is. It's typically 1 to 2 sentences. It includes skills and it includes keywords. And it's adjustable so that depending on the position you're applying for, you can moderate that to fit the circumstances and the situation that you need it to. But in general, it has, who you are, how you add value, and what essentially you are looking for in a position.
Okay, for this next question, Jennifer, I feel like many of us have experienced this, so I'm interested to hear your response.
Mhm.
Some applications require both a resume upload as well as submitting a profile, which much with much of the same information. I really wish we'd get away from that. What is
Me
the best
too.
approach for this?
Yeah, it's, every company uses a different format, right? So some companies will say, sure, just upload your resume. Others make you do both the resume and fill in everything. And others that are a little more advanced in the process, they make you upload your resume and then they pre-populate everything, which is great. So sometimes when you're caught in that situation of the company is making you input all your information plus upload the resume, there's no way around that as far as I know. And I've been doing this a really long time. Maybe if you're looking for a tech job, it's something you can give them some free consulting advice on and how to improve their process of applying because it takes a lot of time to input that manually.
Is there any difference in what you should provide there? So if you've shortened your resume down to a page, should you
Mhm.
put the exact same information where they're having you populate, their prompts? Or do you provide more detail there? Do most companies even look at that part of it? So should you submit the same thing for both?
Mm. So my gut reaction on this is that you should submit the same thing for both. Because I believe what happens is the optical reader for the ATS gets your resume in there and it passes you to the human, right? But when they're using Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever their CRM is to track applicants, that data that gets populated by you in that application is what's going to follow you through your time at the company because it becomes a record of your employment history. So you want that to have in there what you want it to have in there, not necessarily what, either a shortened version or a lengthened version. It should be ideally what matches on the resume.
All right. I think we have time for one more question. And this is one that was asked live during the session, but also came through in the RSVPs. So, for people who have a gap in their employment, what
Mhm.
are your recommendations for how to address that gap in their resume?
Yes. So this is a really great question because sometimes, we have gaps due to COVID. Sometimes we have gaps due to caregiving. Sometimes we have gaps just because we're taking a gap year or a transition period and looking for something. What I recommend is that you have a space on the resume where for that gap, you identify what you were doing. So maybe you were seeking employment for that time, or maybe you were, and you frame that as like um, an aspiring project manager would be the title of that position, right? So you're looking for something and you're actively seeking employment. You just haven't found it. So maybe sometimes there's also in that gap, maybe you went back to school, or maybe you enhanced your skills in some way, or maybe you did some volunteering. Um, I also think it's perfectly fine if you are comfortable with it to put on there that maybe you were doing caregiving. That is a job. So I think when you have a gap, I think that you need to have a way to describe what was happening during that time that you are comfortable with, that will show the employer that, even though maybe you stepped away from the formal workforce during that time, that there was something that you were focused on during that time and that you gained some transferable skills from that will then add value to them and help them see how, you can add to their top or bottom line. So I don't typically advocate hiding the gap. That's not something that I would say, because it will come out in the interview, and then you have to have something ready for how you're going to describe that. So I don't advocate hiding it. I advocate bringing it out into the open. Um, and as long as you are comfortable with how you choose to describe that gap, I would advocate for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Nash. All right. As we close, quick reminder that Dr. Nash will be on our panel of expert career coaches this Friday at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. And so if you're interested in asking more questions of her and others, please feel free to join us. All right. So thank you so much, Dr. Nash. Everyone, please join me in sharing our heartfelt thanks to Dr. Nash for her time
Oh,
today. You're welcome to connect with her via LinkedIn, email, and her website.
I love
Dr.
all the
Nash, I
emojis.
know, isn't it
That's
amazing?
great. Yeah, thank
It's
you
like
guys. You guys
it's
are awesome.
backwards snowing, you know? So Dr. Nash, we appreciate your time, your expertise, and your support. Dr. Nash is joining us for 3 of our webinars this week, and so she's devoting a lot of time to us this week. So thank you so much. We'd like to remind all alums and everyone else here today that a recording of today's session will be emailed to you as a follow-up early next week. A link to our survey is in the chat. We read the feedback and we use the feedback, so please fill out the survey. And don't forget to explore all of our resources on our website. Most of them are available to you on demand. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your time with us today. And go blue. We'll see you next time.
Go blue.